of the burning lamp, watching slowly, eternal pain. Even toes, lighting for more. It's the night of the law, fighting for soul. Take his time, and break for the living. In the dome, you're watching me fade. Night show, the night of the crow. It's the night of the dead brother. Follow the rock and pray. Night of the living day. Night of the day.
All right. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. As always, I'm your host, Pat. Excuse my somewhat stuffy kind of voice. I'm getting over a cold. Did a whole lot of nothing yesterday. Just kind of sat around and spun records. And I thought, why don't I just talk about the records I've been listening to? A little what's spinning kind of deal. Not the most original concept here on YouTube. The metal, the shadowy metal corner of YouTube, especially the record collector element. But hey, this is what I do. I talk about music, whether in sickness or in health. So I have a pile of LPs to talk about. Yeah, I've just been taking it easy. I kind of relish the times when I'm feeling a little under the weather because I'm a very busy guy. I try to stay active. I've been going to the gym 3 or 4 days a week, which has been great. I feel good. Lost some poundage. My kid's at the age where he has activities with little league and gymnastics class and all this other kind of stuff. So we're always on the go, and it's kind of nice to just have an excuse to do nothing but sit around and spin vinyl and finally beat Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This boss battle put away some time, let me tell you. I'm not a big AAA game guy. I missed a whole swath of generations of consoles. Like, I never really played the Red Dead games. I never played the Witcher games. I just, just was doing other stuff with my life when PlayStation 2 through 4 was really a thing. And in my twilight years, I'm kind of getting more in touch with video games. I always liked the old ones, of course, the retro game stuff. I had a functional Nintendo all throughout the 2000s that I played regularly. And I loved Final Fantasy VII. It was one of the 2 games I had for PS1, which up until a few years ago was the most modern that I got. Played the hell out of Final Fantasy VII and Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters 2 and 3. And it's kind of nice to see the whole plot of Final Fantasy VII kind of reimagined and reborn into these new reboots. They're going to be spanning the plot, and everything that happens spans a trilogy now. The 3rd one is yet to come out, but what I was getting at is the boss battle is, taking into account that you're probably going to die a couple times and have to start over halfway through different phases. It took me about 3 hours to get through this, not counting the 20-minute long cutscene wrapping everything up. So yeah, really, really good, but it's one of those things where a completely enjoyable, immersive experience, but also I just wanted to be done with it because I have other games I want to play. It's been hanging over my head, finish off Final Fantasy VII. Finally got a chance because I haven't been feeling good and nothing else to do but spin records and play video games while the kid is at school. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. I did watch a few movies too. I've been buying movies a little bit more recently. I've gotten some in the mail. I don't know if I'm going to talk about them on the channel or not. It's getting to be, that season where everybody's watching horror movies. Surprisingly, I'm not really feeling it that much yet. I think it's just because I live in Halloween Town, USA, and it's everywhere I look. We have been sort of getting in the spirit of the season. I rewatched the OG Addams Family movies, watched them with my kid. Super fun. Love those. I think the cast in that is perfect. Raul Julia, Angelica Houston, Christopher Lloyd. So good. Everybody's perfect in those movies. They're so camp and fun. I know Wednesday's a big deal these days. It's the first season was really hot and everything. I thought it was okay. I'm watching the second season. I'm enjoying it a little bit more. So there's been that, but I've just been watching I watched a horror movie, but I watched, you can probably see the poster behind me, Student Bodies, which is almost like Airplane style humor applied to a slasher flick. It's almost got kind of giallo moments, really, but just goofy pun humor, that kind of thing. And then I watched The Burbs, which is great, and Neighbors. So weird suburban neighbor creepiness, kind of comedies. That's all I've really been into until yesterday. I got some DVDs in the mail. Not sure if they're legit or not. They're from Korea. I'm a big fan of movies like heavy metal. I'm a big fan of old school anime. A lot of new. I don't know where to start or end with anime, but I grew up during an era where everybody watched Akira, you know, that kind of thing. Trying to think about Ralph Bakshi movies, of course. Like I like dark, kind of adult themed animation, especially if it's older, if it's got like a 70s or 80s vibe to it. And I knew of this guy, Rene Laloux. I haven't watched this yet, but I've seen this mentioned all the time, kind of in the same breadth as Belladonna of Sadness. You know, these older 70s and 80s kind of psychedelic, weird, dark movies. This is sci-fi. I haven't watched this yet. Should I cover that up? I don't know. It's alien boobs. This is the one that I watched yesterday. The Time Masters, Les Maîtres du Temps. I'm gonna just pretend I can speak French there. This is what Rene did with Mobius. Mobius was the guy who did a ton of the work in Heavy Metal Magazine, cool sci-fi magazine. There was a movie that was based on it that was always on TBS, if you're the right age to remember that. They're always on in the middle of the night. You know, they censored the boobs, which there's a whole South Park episode about being bummed out that you can't see the boobs in the movie and everything. But this is very cool. I won't give away the plot because it has a huge like plot twist at the end, but there's a little kid trapped on a dangerous, weird, psychedelic kind of planet, and I believe his caretaker, his dad, I think, gets killed by the local flora and fauna, or maybe just the fauna, I guess. And there's a bunch of people going to rescue him that are communicating to him through this little teleportation device, and lots of weirdness ensues after that. It's really a feast for the eyes. Like Mobius's attention to detail and the way the landscapes look is really breathtaking. So, and this is just DVD, but it looks great. Weirdly, this doesn't work with all DVD players. I believe it's supposed to be region free, but I could only get it to play on my PS5, my regular DVD player. It didn't want to work, but whatever. And Gandahar, I threw this on, and then I got busy doing a few things in here, filing some CDs and stuff, so I didn't wholly pay attention to it. I only watched it the first like 15 minutes or so, but I'll get back to you on that one. It's visually very stunning. There's some really cool mutant creatures with like multiple heads and, you know, and giant face on their body and no head and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's all I got from it because I was doing other stuff. I was in and out making food and rearranging a few things in here. Is just playing in the background. All right, so the vinyl that I've been spinning, there's been a few that I decided it's that time of year. I'm going to revisit some stuff, some classics, and there's a few new purchases. There's a few combinations of both, really. One record that I really wanted to go back to that I haven't listened to in quite a while was the classic My Dying Bride debut, As the Flower Withers, on Peaceville. Who else? And this just gets better every time. You know, I've been really in the mood for Doom Death, like I've been talking about. This is one of the main flagship bands on Peaceville that kind of helped found that sound, along with Anathema and Paradise Lost. We'll get to them in a minute. And I just can't get over how tastefully composed this is. Of course, it's death metal, and I'm trying to figure out what the headspace was for these guys in 1992 while they were writing this. I mean, the UK bands sure came up in the same groundswell as a lot of other heavy music that was tangentially related to that sound. I mean, it's the same soil that grindcore sprang up from, Napalm Death came from, all the Crust stuff, label mates of theirs like Deviated Instinct and Prophecy of Doom and the like. So that heaviness was there. I think from what I've read about the tape trading and everything and what bands were influenced by, it seems like a lot of the British bands were listening to Massacre quite a bit. You know, it's not only Barney Greenway when he was in Benediction, Dave Ingram and a bunch of others really, really good at, you know, copying that Camley style vocal wipeout kind of thing. You've got that as an influence. Certainly Autopsy, another label mate, you know, getting the heavy kind of doomy element, but involving this sort of Yorkshire kind of like gothic sort of thing to it with violins and all, a myriad of different approaches to keyboards. there's a very like almost sort of neoclassical approach to what My Dying Bride did. Of course, they just expanded and are still at it today with each subsequent release. Turn Loose the Swans is a Death Doom classic, you know, kind of getting a little bit softer, but expanding their scope. The Angel in the Dark River even further. And they, you know, they went back and forth. Both them and Paradise Lost experimented more with post-punk and that kind of stuff. And to this day, they're still staying true to their roots and kind of combining different elements that they have in different times in the past. But I love this record. The Trinity compilation is really good too, the one that combines all the early EPs. I need to go back and revisit The Angel in the Dark River and Turn Loose the Swans. I remember hearing Turn Loose the Swans when it debuted, and it blew my mind completely. It was in my friend's car. It was actually Matt, the guy from Time Under Earth's mom's car. They made her play. She was not into it. And then I don't remember if I got this before or after at this point. I feel like I heard this and didn't get it at the time. I think I was expecting something a lot more death metal. I didn't know what to do with all the slow parts, but there's just, again, these tastefully placed moments, whether it's when all the instrumentation except for the drums drop out and there's just these pained growls over it early on in the record. All these sort of swells that come in, all the tempo changes that often lapse into straight up punishing death metal with all the trimmings. I just can't gush enough about this. It's been so great going back to it. Then we've got Solemn Extinction Asaru. This was a Jersey death metal band from the early 90s. I think they shared a drummer who played with Incantation live and also was in Deteriorate. So that's pretty cool. This just compiles a couple of demos, a couple of live tracks, some odds and ends. It came out on FOAD, who always do a great job with reissues. This is kind of actually sort of sparse for a FOAD reissue. They really have a lot of bells and whistles on a lot of their releases, like bonus CDs and stuff, but maybe that's just because that's all there was. It's just this handful of tapes or whatever, but this is what you'd expect from a band that shared a member with Incantation and a band practice space with Incantation and Deteriorate. It is, you know, very much firmly death metal, but there are some very doomy elements to it. It's got that sort of very Jersey, very Incantation kind of trem picking sort of thing, that eerie kind of feel that a lot of those bands evoked. Very solid, like pretty decent production for just two demos from the actually mid 90s, the Exiled demo from 93 and the Asaru Brethren demo from 95. We've also got a couple of live tracks from Streets, which I think was in, I want to say that was in Long Island, and the pre-Solemn band It, with 3 songs on here: Malignant Spawn, Sick, and Swollen Vagina. So yeah, great, solid, raw death metal. Like I said, I'm not really into the doomy death metal that's more straight down the line, guttural kind of stuff, if it's new. There's just something very of its time with stuff like this that came out in the mid-90s that I feel like most new bands can't really capture. Just a certain recording and just the energy of like a new genre being born. You know, you're not going to get that these days, as much as people study and love that stuff. And I'm sure a lot of people like it. It just doesn't do it for me right now anyway. And then I kind of went on a weird thing where I was filing some stuff. I came across some Dusk, the band Dusk from Wisconsin. I came across some of their CDs to move along the racks, and I was like, wait, there's 2 associated bands. I'm scratching my head. I'm like, before I moved, I bought one of them. And I think it's a one-word monosyllabic kind of thing. And I think the artwork was also on a Godflesh record. And it's really good, but I only spun it like once, and then I filed it, and then we had to move. Like, where is that? Do I still have it? So I was like, okay, well, I need to listen to it. So Bleed, Womb, shared members with Crawl. A former member that didn't make it to this record was in Dusk as well. So kind of same incestuous kind of scene. This came out on EMP Label Group and Combat. I forgot Combat Records. Combat came back for a while. I don't think it's still going, but apparently they put some stuff out, and apparently they decided to reissue this like mechanized, sort of lightly industrial death metal band from Wisconsin. Whatever. It's a nice pressing. You know, looks good. It's not like super pixelated or anything. They did a decent job of the reissue. This is a pretty cool vinyl. This sort of almost like weird peacock feather patterned, semi-translucent green there. And it says that it was executive produced by David Ellison. I don't know if that's the same one. The slap in the bass, embarrassing Zoom moment, David Ellison. Anyways, so this is an EP. It's 6 songs. If you like Godflesh, you know, early Street Cleaner era Godflesh, it's a lot more of a death metal version of that. There's similar artists like Dead World that were prominent at the time, maybe Meat Hook Seed. I feel like Meat Hook Seed had a little bit more in their quiver in terms of like sound. I think they had a lot more like kind of fast stuff from what I remember. I haven't talked about them or thought about them in a while. Matt, The Dark Path, miss that guy, just posted he got one of their tapes on Meat Hook Seed, that is, one of their tapes on Instagram. Kind of made me think about that, but it was guys from Obituary and somebody else who I'm forgetting right now doing industrial death metal. Anyways, these guys, this is like slow-mo, drum machine driven death metal stuff. Very heavy, very crushing, very plotting. And that's pretty much all you really need to know. It's very good for what it is. And then going back to, I don't know, a month or so ago, I was on What Are You Listening To? And one of the selections for Mike, the host, my buddy in Japan there, he was talking about a band called Sacrifice. And this is one of those bands that I read about them and people posted them, I think, on the Nuclear War Now board forever ago, and I just kind of memory hold it. One of those bands like the other there's numerous sacrileges, but there's the other sacrilege that is, they're more of like a brutal thrash band, but their logo is so close to the UK one that it kind of fooled me a couple of times. One of those kind of deals. This is Sacrifice from Japan, Tears. This is the 3rd LP. The logo's so close to the Canadian Sacrifice that I think it tricked me a few times, and then I realized, okay, that's not the same one. But this just got reissued. These are going quick if they haven't already. Sorry State had them in. I think it was like Jeff's record of the month when they came in. They sold out of Sorry State real quick. And I got this from the Bandcamp for Bitter Lake Recordings. I will leave a link. I don't know if they're all sold out or not, but this is their 3rd LP from the early 90s, I think 92 or so. And this is a Japanese thrash metal band, not super technical. Like, describing them as thrash is kind of tough because they're straightforward, they're driving, but they're not like a Motorhead, motor punk, metal punk kind of thing either. There's a lot of elements of that. It's very dark and grimy and straightforward. If I were to think of the best possible comparison, I would say the first couple of Voivod records before they got weird. Even though if you really listen to Roar and War and Pain, they are structurally weird, like the riffs and everything. But I would say that'd be the best comparison. Like, there's a lot of kind of galloping double bass on it and everything, and it's driving and very kind of Motorhead and Discharge driven, but there's a certain chunky bottom end to it that keeps it firmly thrash metal. This is the heavier of the two. I also got their 2nd LP. Grab that for you right now. Their 2nd LP, Total Steel, which came out a few years before, I want to say. 1990, yeah. Carnal Beast. This came out on Dying Victims. I managed to get this for a steal on Slamazon.com, which always costs a small share of my soul every time I use it. But randomly, I've found stuff on there for so cheap on vinyl. This was being sold by Soundgarden, which is a weird, like, 2-location chain, or maybe it's 3. I don't know. There's only a couple of stores. One of them's in my hometown of Syracuse, New York. The other one is in Baltimore. So that's weird. But I think it was the Baltimore location was selling this for like $22, which is a steal and a half. I mean, a total steal and a half. Waka Waka. Comes with a poster, all kinds of stuff in here. I'm not going to unfurl everything, but a poster, a postcard. Cool lyric sheet there. I like the continuity of they've got a cool mascot. It's a very Motorhead looking mascot. You know, I'd say those moments where Motorhead gets beefier and heavier during the Mickey D era, you know, is kind of somewhat sonically similar to this, but it's way heavier, way gruffer kind of vocals, you know, very like Japanese, not death metal, but very like, you know, heavily strained kind of vocals. It's odd because I know a lot of people who are nuts for Japanese metal and they're all about Abigail and Sabat and Metal Lucifer, and I don't really hear Sacrifice that much as part of the conversation. I probably would have been hip to them or listening to them much earlier if that was the case, but they were just completely off my radar until Mike brought that out, and I was like, oh yeah, I know that band vaguely. Why don't I go try to track down everything they have? Keeping it in Japan here, I just bought this on a whim. This is Hebi Katana. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation, but we'll go with that. Imperfection. This is Japanese kind of stoner doom stuff. A lot more in its toolbox than your average kind of Sabbath clone. First of all, there's a lot more 70s stuff this kind of reminds me of than just Sabbath. You know, you can pick out like 70s Scorps, you could pick out BOC. You know, it's very heavy and woody and kind of stonery, but it's not just aping. It's certainly aping a certain era, but not like one band, which is cool. But yeah, cool listen. That's all I really am remembering about it right now. I've just spun it like once or twice. And we've got, there's a lot of rude boobies in this update. I gotta be strategic. I have no idea if like frickin' YouTube picks up on this crap or cares at this stage. It's always changing. But this is the Bottled Doom Lazy Band. They're a French band. Another band I just kind of went all in on. I bought a live CD of theirs from Paragon Records, and I was like, which is also where I got that Solemn from. And I was like, this is a cool sound. I like this. This is up my alley. There's nothing super standout about it, but I am just loving anything that sounds like Reverend Bizarre and St. Vitus and Pentagram. And that's what this sounds like. It sounds like all the aforementioned. The vocals are really unhinged, though. This really like wailing, almost like outsider art, like, I don't know, kind of crazy, dramatic kind of vocal style that goes above and beyond a lot of bands of their ilk. And I don't know if it's because they're French and it's just like the proximity, it's a little bit closer to the Mediterranean, you know, a little bit closer to Italy than other places. And the closer you get to Italy, the more like dramatic and theatric you are. I don't know. Just thinking of all the Italian stuff like Mortuary Drape and Dark Quarter and all that kind of stuff. Death SS, you know. Keeping it in Europe, keeping it European. This was, where did I get this? I think I grabbed this at Residency, if I'm remembering right. But this is one of those records, came out about 4 years ago, and I really liked the tape. Got the tape off of Bandcamp, and I was like, you know, when I get a chance, I gotta up the quality and get a vinyl copy. It's definitely worth owning on wax. This is Wheel Preserved in Time. Came out in 2021. Cruz del Sur music, German band, epic doom stuff. You know, kind of wailing, sort of bordering on almost kind of power metal approach to vocals. FFO, Candlemass, Solitude Aeternis. You know, epic doom, but very, very well done. Doesn't get super drawn out. You know, it's very to the point. 7 songs, so you've got some lengthier compositions on here. Great kind of rolling, sort of drawn out kind of riffage going on. Lots of emotion behind the vocals, like really well done and believable too. You know how like the guy from Warning, it doesn't really seem like he's rooted in a fantasy kind of thing. It's like legit misery kind of deal. I feel like there's a similar approach with this guy. It's, I mean, it is kind of, you know, dark fantasy kind of lyric themes and everything. Aeon of Darkness, When the Shadow Takes You Over, that sort of thing. But like, I'm believing it when he's belting it out. It's great, kind of epic doom stuff. little bit more stripped down sounding, like a little bit more straightforward than a lot of other stuff of that style, like production wise also. Then Alan, Let's Talk Metal, Heavy Metallurgy, Professor Alan, one of my favorite people on YouTube, did a whole deep dive on St. Vitus. If you haven't watched it, check it out. I couldn't have shot a better one myself, St. Vitus being one of my favorite bands of all time. I have a lot of those, but up there with Dead Can Dance and The Accused and probably a dozen other bands. St. Vitus is a band that's been with me since high school. I love to death. I'm in a particularly heavy doom period right now where I'm listening to a ton of that. And Alan discussed the self-titled, and I was like, God damn, I don't think I own that. I had it on CD at one point. I went looking through my CDs, wasn't there. And I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can just pick up a copy. And SST has been a tough mistress like the past couple of years, up until very recently. Greg Ginn has been reissuing stuff finally. I know for a long time it was hard to get like any of the classic Bad Brains records and a lot of the Black Flag stuff, even Descendants, all the flagship bands that are one of the reasons why SST was such an influential label and so awesome. I don't know if it was just like legal stuff or that dude's weird and greedy from what I'm told. Whatever. The stuff was out of print for a long time, but this is everywhere. You can get this for under $30 online. This is the self-titled St. Vitus. They even kept the embossing, which is really, really nice, the silver embossing there. I have a weird relationship with the SST catalog of St. Vitus stuff just because the only one I had for so long as a kid during high school was Heavier Than Thou, which is a best of. And I think they did a really good job of curating those tracks. I think they are their strongest tracks, but I'm so heavily biased because that's all I listened to by them for years and years. That and COD, Children of Doom, because that was the new one that came out on Relapse, Nuclear Blast when I was younger. So it's weird to hear any of the other songs and think of it as an album. I own everything else. I am familiar with the songs that aren't on Heavier Than Thou. It's just so ingrained in me. That track listing, those songs for that era of the band, the early Rieger's Wino stuff, the pre-Hellhound Records stuff, pre-reunion stuff, obviously. And, Burial at Sea and The Psychopath, the two songs on the second side. Because St. Vitus and White Magic, Black Magic are on Heavier Than Thou. Zombie Hunger, The Psychopath, and Burial at Sea are not. This is very much, almost in a way, sort of like speaking of their label mates, very much like a Black Flag, My War kind of situation, or maybe Corrosion of Conformity, Animosity kind of situation, where people might be able to have pretty strong opinions because side A and side B are pretty different. I think Alan mentioned, like, it is kind of weird how kind of front-loaded it is, that you have these upbeat tracks like on the first side, and the second side's kind of a slog. But if you like to doom out, look no further than side B of this record, especially Burial at Sea. I think Burial at Sea, from what I've read, it's been quoted as like a big influence on a lot of the heavier, dronier stuff. I think it's been covered by numerous bands. I want to say one of the Southern Lord bands, like a Greg Anderson related project, covered it, but I can't remember who it was. It might have been Burning Witch. One of those bands from that era covered it. During my Melvin's sort of deep dive I was on, like end of the winter last year, I was watching a lot of interviews with Buzz Osborne, and he mentioned Burial at Sea being one of his favorite songs from one of the bands of that era. It's just it's an epic. It's like an OG doom epic, and it's great. So I'm glad to have that in my possession again. I have no idea what happened to that CD. I definitely had it, but this deserves to be on vinyl. Love the embossing, killer. And then let's move on to another type of doom. I'm going to talk about one CD just because I just listened to it while I was beating Final Fantasy VII, and I feel like it deserves to be talked about, especially because it's a new release. Reviled by Doom, the band. Kind of funny. As I was getting really into Crust, I was living in Rochester, New York, and I was going to community college. Check. Okay, so real quick from the editing bay thing here. I don't really have time or energy to hook up a camera. I just wanted to throw in this little anecdote. The whole purpose of me mentioning going to community college and getting into Crust was that I was getting really into Doom, and I used to have lunch with this metalhead guy named Mark or Matt. I don't remember, but he was a cool guy. He was into good stuff. We used to talk about metal all the time, and I would talk about Doom, and I don't think he ever quite understood that I was talking about a band and not the genre. I'd be like, oh man, this Doom CD is awesome. And he'd be like, I don't know, man, a lot of that stuff is too slow for me. I was like, no, the Crust band. And it turned into this whole like who's on first kind of scenario. I don't know if that's even worth talking about now or reminiscing about, but I thought I'd throw it in here because that's the whole reason I was about to go on a tangent about that point in time, and I completely lost the plot because I like to babble, if you hadn't noticed. And I was a budding young cruster. I loved metal. I think like getting into Crust and getting out of the more straightforward popular street punk of the day was kind of like a, if you got into metal first, it was like kind of an excuse to get right back into metal, and it was like cool and acceptable or something. Because the music was metallic, a lot of Crust stuff, especially the stuff we were getting into at the time, like bands like Grimple and Logical Nonsense are like one half step away from being straight up metal bands. And also it was kind of like, yeah, I like Celtic Frost because that's okay now, apparently. I can't be into the Casualties and like Celtic Frost, but I can be into everything coming out of Minneapolis on Profane Existence and be into Celtic Frost for whatever reason. Anyhow, I was discovering, I'd heard of Doom via t-shirts, as we did back in the day, onions on our belts, learning about bands from t-shirts worn by other bands. I think it was in the era of Earth AD by Sepultura. If it was the Refuse Resist video or Territory video, I want to say it was Pasteurize, but I could be wrong. It could be in one of those videos as well, Dead Embryonic Cells. But the guys from Sepultura, Max in particular, wore Doom shirts. They wore Amoebic shirts, and that was a big like, who's that kind of thing. Not long after, Nailbomb covered a Doom song, which happens to be on here. So I wanted to know who Doom was. And lo and behold, I come to find out that Doom is a classic Crust band. It borrows a lot of elements from Discharge, a lot of straightforward, fast European hardcore, D-beat before it was ever really called that. A lot of European stuff they were drawing inspiration from too. The Scandinavian bands, particularly, just raw, fast stuff with vocals that were a little bit more monstrous and a little bit something, not quite, but approaching something that was similar to grindcore and death metal. So I heard about this band, and right around the time I was hearing about them, they came out with this massive compilation called Fuck Peaceville. They were on Peaceville, pre, the Peaceville 3. Peaceville kind of started as more of a punk label. If you get a chance, read the Hammy autobiography. It's great. He talks all about it. He was in punk bands before he, got involved in metal. He was in the Instigators and stuff. They were on Peaceville early on, and as Peaceville became more and more of a metal label, they had some sort of distribution deal with Music for Nations, which was a major label in the UK. I had Metallica tapes that had Music for Nations on them. Like they had distribution deals with a lot of big metal bands. I believe they released bands like Metallica exclusively in the UK during like the Ride the Lightning era. So when they had that merger, when Peaceville had that merger, Doom wasn't cool with it because they were super DIY, not for profit, that sort of thing. And they had some sort of falling out, and they re-recorded everything they had done up to that point, much of which was already on Peaceville, and put out this massive compilation. Well, story goes, obviously they mended things with Hammy, they're friends again. This has been out for a while under the new title Reviled, I think like at least 10 years. I think it was on CD only for a while. I'm guessing, not 100% sure about that. I only saw it on CD for the longest time, and the vinyl's out now. So the recording on all these, I would recommend if you're just starting to get into this kind of stuff and bands like Doom, maybe check out Reviled first. It's a lot of people I know's like favorite versions of these songs. They're a little bit slicker for lack of a better term. We're not talking Bob Rock production here or anything like that, but they're a little bit like easier on the ears. The Police Bastard 7-inch and certain splits they have are really raw. This is a little bit easier to kind of just throw on. But yeah, everything they had up to a certain point, I mean, I want to say up until like Rush Hour of the Gods record, I believe, up until that record, everything re-recorded just to kind of stick it to Peaceville at the time. Excellent, excellent stuff. Like if you're looking for starter pack crust punk, there's a reason why this band's logo was on the butt flap of many a train hopper in the 90s. Maybe not any good reason, but they are an awesome band. They are an awesome band. Not saying anything particular about the taste of those people. All right. So that's all the vinyl. Where did I put that CD? So finally, Paradise Lost came out with Ascension. This is pretty recent. Just came out in the past month. I think it came out in September. This is incredible. I've been back on board with Paradise Lost since, I want to say, Medusa or earlier. I know they had a bit of a weird period. They did that sort of synth pop thing. That was a long time ago now. And I heard that's actually really good. I've been meaning to check out the kind of more oddball records from them. And they've been just like a solid band doing what they do for quite some time, kind of combining different eras of their sound and everything. This is fantastic. Tyrant's Serenade, the second song on there, there's a music video for it. They're like playing in a barn and it's really bleak and stuff. It's so cool. It reminds me a lot of Typo Negative, taking that sort of Typo Negative chorus approach and kind of morphing it into the Paradise Lost sound. I need to go back and revisit the newer records, the ones that came before this. I know they were kind of on that anyway. And it's a tough thing to say what era influenced what with that, because they're from the same soil. They're from the same area that like Sisters of Mercy and New Model Army and Southern Death Cult are from. And I know that certainly must have seeped into their sound. It's definitely that sort of bellowing, mournful kind of gothic approach to vocals, but really, really catchy stuff. The stuff that picks up the pace and goes a little bit more straightforward metal is way more like rockin', foot up on the vocal monitor, kind of like almost kind of charging kind of heavy metal pace to it, but cloaked in all this fog and gloom and everything. This is a great record. I was, wrapped in that cinematic 3-hour long boss battle with Sephiroth, man. And I'm really glad these guys had my back, man. We got it. We got it. We avenged Aerith. I think this is probably going to be an album of the year for me. This is fantastic. I'm big in the mood, big in my feels about Death Doom right now, but it's great to have these guys back doing what they do very well. I like it a lot more than the last one. I'll say that much. The last one was good, but this is killer. It's all super catchy stuff. So check it out. That's about it for now.